What's more heartbreaking, seeing the man who left you happy with someone else, or realizing he's rewriting your shared history like you never existed? The store was filled with soft lullabies and shelves lined with tiny onesies, plush toys, and pastel-colored baby bottles. I stood there, hand on my swollen belly, comparing two different shades of baby blue. It was supposed to be a peaceful day. Just me, picking out clothes for the little boy growing inside me. But peace is fragile, and mine shattered the moment I turned around and saw him. There he was. Ethan, my ex-husband, and not just him. He wasn't alone. His hand was casually wrapped around the waist of a tall, perfectly dressed woman with silky blonde hair. She laughed at something he whispered in her ear. They looked like a couple straight out of a magazine, polished, happy, completely oblivious to the emotional wreck they just triggered 5 feet away. I froze. They didn't see me at first. I wanted to disappear behind the stack of baby blankets, but my body wouldn't move. My heart pounded in my chest, not just from shock, but from betrayal, anger, and pain. Because here's the truth, they didn't know. I was 5 months pregnant with Ethan's child. He left me 3 months ago. No explanation, no closure. Just packed his things one morning and walked out. Said he needed space, that he felt lost, that he was trying to find himself. Turns out he found himself in someone else's bed. And now, here we were. I, carrying the consequence of our past, and he, parading around his future like our marriage had never existed. I reached for the shopping cart to steady myself. The world blurred. My breath caught. I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or just crumble onto the floor. But I did none of those things. Instead, I watched. I watched them walk into the same aisle, the baby aisle. They were shopping. For a baby. My mind couldn't keep up with my heart. Was she pregnant too? Were they buying things for her baby? Did he replace me so completely that even my unborn child no longer mattered? I clenched the cart tighter. That's when she noticed me. She tapped his shoulder. He turned around, and his face, oh God, the way his face changed when he saw me. The smirk disappeared. His jaw tightened. His eyes went cold, as if I was the intruder. Like I didn't belong there. Like I didn't belong anywhere. "What are you doing here?" he asked. No hello, no concern, just cold indifference. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity. This was a baby store. I was pregnant. What the hell did he think I was doing here? But I said nothing. I looked at the woman. She looked back at me. Up and down. Judging. Measuring. She wasn't just a new girlfriend. She was the replacement. And I realized in that moment that I wasn't just fighting for my dignity anymore. I was fighting for my baby's place in this world. I took a deep breath. The words piled up in my throat, begging to be released, but my pride held them back. I refused to break down in front of her. "I'm here to shop for my son," I said calmly, one hand resting protectively on my belly. His eyes flicked down to my stomach, then quickly away, like he couldn't bear the truth staring him in the face. The woman tilted her head slightly, fake sympathy painted all over her flawless face. "Oh," she said slowly, "you're that ex-wife." Her words sliced deeper than she probably realized. I ignored her and turned to Ethan. "So this is what you meant by needing space?" I asked quietly. "Playing house with someone new while I raise our baby alone?" His mouth twitched. For a second, I thought I saw guilt, but it vanished just as fast. "You're being dramatic," he said. "We're not here to fight. You should go." He wanted me to leave? As if I was the one who didn't belong? I felt my stomach twist, not from the baby, but from the fury rising inside me. I was sick of being treated like I was disposable. Like our marriage, our baby, my pain, none of it mattered. So I didn't leave. I walked past them slowly, deliberately, and reached for a tiny gray onesie hanging on the rack next to where they stood. As I grabbed it, my hand brushed hers. She recoiled as if my touch was something toxic. I smiled. "Don't worry," I said softly. "This won't fit your baby. It's for someone with a conscience." The silence that followed was heavy. She blinked. Ethan stepped forward. "Enough, Ava." My name, from his lips, sounded foreign now. "You left me," I said. "You walked out on your family, and now you want me to pretend this is normal?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. The truth hung between us like smoke. Then, just as I turned to walk away, I heard her whisper, not softly enough, "No wonder he left her. She's exhausting." I froze and slowly turned back around, because if she wanted a fight, she was going to get one. "My name is Ava Mitchell. I'm 32 years old, and for most of my adult life, I played by the rules. I was the good girl, the one who never broke curfew, never missed a deadline, never raised her voice in public. I grew up in a quiet neighborhood in Portland, Oregon, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts at a diner to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. She taught me to be strong, to be humble, and above all, to be kind, even when life wasn't. That upbringing shaped everything about me. I put myself through college with scholarships and part-time jobs, majored in early childhood education. I always wanted to be a teacher. Not because of the paycheck, but because I wanted to give children what I didn't always have: safety, encouragement, and someone to believe in them. After graduation, I became a preschool teacher. It wasn't glamorous, but it was fulfilling. I loved watching kids grow, seeing the spark in their eyes when they learned something new. I thought I had found my purpose. Then I met Ethan. He was charming, ambitious, and said all the right things. He worked in finance, sleek suits, fast cars, and the kind of confidence that made people listen when he entered a room. He was everything I wasn't, and maybe that's what drew me in. We met at a charity event for underprivileged schools. I was a volunteer. He was a donor. He said he admired women who gave back to the community. I believed him. 6 months later, we were engaged. 12 months after that, I became Mrs. Ava Mitchell Hart. Marriage changed things, not suddenly, but slowly. In ways that were hard to notice at first. Ethan started coming home later. Work dinners became more frequent. The laughter that once filled our kitchen grew quieter, replaced by short answers and long silences. Still, I held on. Because that's what you do when you believe in love. You fight, you adapt, you forgive. I told myself he was just stressed, that things would go back to how they were, once he closed that big deal, or once we took that long overdue vacation. Then I got pregnant. It wasn't planned, but when I saw that little pink line on the test, I cried, not out of fear, but hope. I thought maybe, just maybe, this baby would bring us back together, give us something real to hold on to. But Ethan didn't see it that way. When I told him, his face went pale. He said he needed time, that he wasn't ready, that we weren't ready. 2 weeks later, he was gone. I didn't cry when the front door closed behind him. I sat in our living room, on the couch we picked out together from a catalog, staring at the empty hallway. The silence in the apartment was deafening. Not even the hum of the refrigerator could drown out the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. It was the first time I truly understood what it meant to be alone. Being pregnant isn't easy. You're tired all the time. Your body changes in ways no one really prepares you for. But being pregnant and abandoned? That's a different kind of pain. A different kind of exhaustion. I went to my doctor's appointments alone. I held the sonogram printouts with shaking hands. I listened to the heartbeat of our baby by myself. I cried in the car afterward, then wiped my tears and walked into work like nothing happened. But I never stopped believing that my baby deserved love, even if it had to come from one parent instead of two. I moved out of our apartment 3 weeks after Ethan left. The landlord was kind enough to let me break the lease early. I went back to a small one-bedroom near my mother's house. It wasn't ideal, but it was safe. It was familiar. Mom offered to move in with me for a while, but I said no. I needed to prove, to her, to myself, that I could do this. That I wasn't broken. That I wouldn't let Ethan's abandonment define me. My friends tried to be there for me, but people have their own lives. Baby showers, couples dinners. It all became too much. Eventually, the texts slowed down. The calls stopped, and it was just me. And the baby. But in that quiet, something started to shift. I began to realize that I was stronger than I thought. Every time I got out of bed when I didn't want to, every time I smiled at a child in class, even though my heart was breaking. It was proof. Proof that I wasn't just surviving, I was fighting. Fighting to give my baby a life better than mine. Fighting to hold on to the pieces of myself that Ethan tried to make disappear. And most importantly, fighting to believe that I still mattered. Even if the person I loved most made me feel like I didn't. And I promised myself that day, no matter what came next, I would never let anyone make me feel invisible again. 2 weeks after the baby store incident, an invitation arrived. At first, I thought it was a mistake. The envelope was thick, ivory-colored with gold trim, the kind of luxury you could smell before you even opened it. My name was written in cursive, too perfect to be handwritten. Inside, there was a formal card with embossed lettering. The Heart Foundation cordially invites you to its annual winter gala, a night of hope. I stared at it for a long time. The Heart Foundation, that was Ethan's family's charity. His mother started it 20 years ago to support community education, a cause close to her heart. And every year they held a lavish gala at the Grand Arbor Hotel in downtown Seattle. Black tie, champagne towers, celebrity donors, and more camera flashes than a movie premiere. And now they wanted me there? I read the fine print. The invitation wasn't addressed to Mrs. Ava Mitchell Hart. It was simply Ava Mitchell. Still, something inside me whispered, go. Not out of revenge, not out of pride, but because I used to belong in that world. And I needed to see how much of me still did. The Grand Arbor Hotel stood like a glass palace in the middle of the city, 40 floors of marble, chandeliers, and money. Lots of money. I hadn't stepped foot in that building since Ethan and I attended the gala the year before, back when I was still the wife of the rising star. The night of the gala, I stood in front of my mirror, staring at the dress I borrowed from a friend. It was navy blue, elegant, stretchy enough for my growing bump. My hair was pulled into a low bun, my makeup minimal but clean. I didn't look glamorous, but I looked like me. And for the first time in a while, that was enough. I arrived alone. The valet took my keys without question. The lobby was already glowing with holiday lights. Everything sparkled. The walls, the guests, the tension in the air. Classical music drifted from the ballroom. Waiters passed with silver trays of hors d'oeuvres I couldn't pronounce. It felt surreal, like I was walking into someone else's life. But it was my life once, and I was ready to reclaim it. That's when I saw the name on the guest list board near the entrance. Ethan Hart and Savannah Lane. The ballroom looked exactly as I remembered it. Opulent, majestic, intimidating. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling like frozen raindrops. White roses and silver ribbons lined every table. A live string quartet played softly in the background. The entire room glowed with polished luxury and quiet judgment. People were dressed to the nines. Men in tailored tuxedos, women in floor-length gowns, with diamonds so big they caught the light every time they turned their heads. Conversations floated mid-air. Shallow, polite, rehearsed. I walked slowly through the crowd, conscious of every glance sent my way. Some faces recognized me. I could see the surprise flicker in their eyes, followed by the awkward half-smiles, the forced "oh wow, hi" energy. Others just stared, at my bump, at my dress, at the fact that I had shown up alone. I ignored them. I was here for me. Not to prove anything, but to remind myself that I belonged in rooms like this, even if I didn't have a man on my arm or a designer label on my back. Then I saw him. Ethan stood across the room, his posture as perfect as ever. He wore a black tuxedo that hugged his broad shoulders, hair perfectly styled, drink in hand. But it wasn't him that made my stomach turn. It was the woman beside him. Savannah. She wore a blood-red satin dress that clung to every curve. Her heels were too high, her laugh too loud. She looked like the very definition of I won. But what struck me most wasn't her beauty. It was the way she held Ethan's arm like he was a trophy. Their eyes met mine. He stiffened. She smirked. I held her gaze, steady, unapologetic. And I kept walking. The rest of the evening was a blur of champagne glasses, forced conversations, and fake laughter. I managed to avoid them for most of the night, until dinner. Assigned seating, and fate apparently had a cruel sense of humor. My place card? Directly across from Ethan and Savannah. I sat down slowly, heart pounding in my ears. The air at the table thickened instantly. He didn't speak, she didn't blink. Then she leaned forward, smiling sweetly. "Ava," she said. "How brave of you to come tonight, alone." Savannah Lane wasn't just a new girlfriend. She was a calculated presence. Everything about her was curated, from her designer gowns to her icy smile. She didn't just walk into rooms, she conquered them. And tonight, sitting across from me at the gala table, she looked like she was exactly where she had always meant to be. She leaned back in her chair, sipping white wine with a grace that felt rehearsed. Her diamond necklace sparkled under the chandelier light, as if screaming for attention. She wasn't trying to blend in, she wanted to be seen, and she wanted me to see her. "You know," she said sweetly, "Ethan told me you used to be shy at these things." I looked at her, expressionless. That must have been a long time ago. She chuckled. Light, high-pitched, patronizing. People change when they're not held back. Held back. That was the phrase that did it. To her, I wasn't Ethan's past. I was his obstacle. A footnote in the biography she was trying to rewrite with him. Ethan, sitting beside her, didn't say a word. Not a single word. His eyes stayed on his plate as if the roasted duck could protect him from the weight of what was happening at that table. But I remembered this version of him. The one who went quiet when things got messy. The one who let others do his dirty work while keeping his hands clean. He didn't have to insult me. Savannah would do it for him. They were a perfect team. What Savannah didn't know, or maybe she did, was that she wasn't Ethan's first other woman. There had been others. Subtle flings, whispers in the office, excuses that didn't add up. I had ignored the signs, blamed myself, thought I wasn't enough. But Savannah wasn't just another affair. She was his escape plan. After dinner, I stepped outside for some air. The cold hit me like a slap, but it was better than suffocating in that ballroom. I stood on the balcony, hands on the railing, trying to steady my breath. And then, her heels clicked behind me. Savannah. She stopped a few feet away, wrapping her faux fur shawl tighter around her shoulders. "I know this must be hard for you," she said, voice soft and condescending. "But Ethan's moved on. He deserves to be happy." "And you think he wasn't happy with me?" I asked. She smiled. "He told me everything. About your marriage, about the way you clung to him, the baby, the stress. He was drowning. I just pulled him out. For a second I couldn't speak. The arrogance, the coldness. The way she stood there, calm, confident, utterly unbothered, as if breaking a marriage and stealing a man was a charity act. As if I should thank her for doing me a favor. I turned to face her fully. "He was drowning?" I repeated, voice low. "No. He was hiding. There's a difference." Her smirk faltered just for a second, then she stepped closer. "You can play the victim all you want, Ava, but let's be honest, he chose me, and you can't accept that." I looked her dead in the eye. "No, I accept it. What I don't accept is the way you two pretend like what you did doesn't matter." Savannah shrugged. "People fall out of love. It happens." "Yes," I said, "but decent people don't humiliate others in the process." Just then, Ethan appeared at the balcony doors. "Ava," he said carefully, "can we talk? Alone?" Savannah gave him a knowing look, then walked back inside, hips swaying with every step. I didn't say a word until the door closed behind her. "You told her everything?" I asked him. He sighed. "She wanted to understand. I was honest." "No, you were selfish," I snapped. "You made me look like the enemy in my own story." His face hardened. "It wasn't working, Ava. You know that. The pregnancy just sped things up." "Do you hear yourself?" I asked. "You talk like this baby is a problem you couldn't wait to escape." He rubbed his temples like I was giving him a headache. "It's complicated." "No, Ethan, it's not. You cheated, you lied, and you left." Silence. He didn't deny it, and that told me everything. When I walked back into the ballroom, something inside me had changed. Not broken, changed, hardened, cleared. They could keep their chandeliers and their champagne, but I wasn't going to let either of them rewrite the story of who I was. When I returned to the ballroom, the energy had shifted. The charity auction was starting, the highlight of every Heart Foundation gala. A spotlight illuminated the grand stage, now adorned with velvet drapes and a towering LED screen displaying donors' names. The host, a well-known TV personality, took the mic and welcomed the crowd with practiced charisma. I tried to blend into the background, standing near the back wall, far from Ethan and Savannah's orbit. But my piece was short-lived. From across the room, I heard Savannah's unmistakable voice, loud enough to cut through the music and the chatter. "You should come closer, Ava," she said, her voice sweet but mocking. "Ethan's donating something very personal tonight." My stomach dropped. I turned to see her already walking toward the stage, clutching Ethan's hand dramatically. The crowd clapped, not for her but for the next donation item being introduced. And then I saw it. On the giant screen, a framed photograph. A limited edition black and white shot of the Hart family's first charitable school in Ghana, taken by a famous photographer. Beside it, the donation caption read, "Donated by Ethan Hart and Savannah Lane, in honor of new beginnings." New beginnings. It wasn't just a donation. It was a public message, about them, about me, about what they'd left behind, and what they now celebrated. People murmured. A few turned to look at me. The words on the screen flickered again. New beginnings. Bold, glowing, final. And then Savannah, with the mic now in her hand, turned to the crowd. We believe every child deserves a fresh start, she said, smiling wide. Just like we've been lucky enough to find one, together. The applause was loud. I stood there frozen, humiliated. It wasn't just a speech, it was a staged spectacle, to erase me, to rewrite the narrative, to paint their betrayal as some kind of noble transformation. And I was the shadow they were trying to bury. I felt my hands shake, my face flushed hot. I could feel every eye in that room turn to me. The pregnant ex-wife they'd conveniently forgotten. I could have walked out right then. No one would have blamed me. I had every reason to leave, to cry in the car, to scream into a pillow at home. But I didn't. I stayed. Rooted to the spot. Staring at the woman who had dismantled my life with a smile on her face, at the man who stood beside her like he didn't have a past, like I and our unborn child were nothing more than a bad memory. I didn't realize my fists were clenched until I felt my nails dig into my palms. A waiter passed by, offering champagne. I waved him off. I needed air, not alcohol. That's when I felt a tap on my shoulder. "Excuse me," came a low voice. I turned. It was Mrs. Hart, Ethan's mother. I hadn't seen her in months, not since the day Ethan left me. She was still elegant, regal even, dressed in deep emerald satin, her gray hair swept into a flawless chignon. "Ava," she said gently, "can we talk for a moment, in private?" I followed her out to a side corridor near the ballroom, my heart pounding. "I didn't know Savannah would do that," she said as soon as the door closed behind us, "or that they would use my foundation's stage to make a mockery of everything." I searched her face, unsure if it was real sympathy or well-practiced diplomacy. "You knew about them?" I asked. She hesitated. I knew they were seeing each other, but I didn't know it started before. I nodded. Silence filled the space between us. "I'm sorry, Ava," she said finally. "You deserved better than what he gave you." Her words surprised me, but they didn't fix anything. When I stepped back into the ballroom, the auction had moved on. The spotlight was now on someone else. The crowd laughed, clinked glasses, whispered their opinions, and yet I could still feel the echo of Savannah's words vibrating in the air. I walked past Ethan and Savannah without a word. Savannah gave me a smug glance, clearly expecting a reaction. I gave her none. But inside, I was burning. Not with shame, but with a new, undeniable clarity. They may have humiliated me tonight, but this was not how my story would end. The next morning, the sun rose like nothing had happened. But inside me, everything had changed. I stayed in bed long after the light hit the curtains. My phone buzzed, messages from a few old friends who'd seen photos from the gala. "You looked amazing," one said. "You handled it so gracefully," wrote another. Gracefully, I had stood there like a ghost while my ex-husband and his girlfriend performed a public love story on top of my broken heart. Nothing about it felt graceful. I didn't reply. Instead, I stared at the ceiling, hand resting on my belly, waiting for the baby to move. Some mornings he kicked immediately. But today, it took longer. Maybe he sensed it too, that something in me had shut down. By afternoon, I still hadn't eaten. The fridge was full, but everything made me nauseous. I poured a glass of water, but even that felt heavy in my throat. I sat on the couch, curled into the corner, and let the silence wrap around me like a blanket I didn't ask for. That night, the nightmares came. I dreamt I was at the gala again. Only this time, I was invisible. People walked through me like I wasn't there. Ethan and Savannah danced in the center of the ballroom while I stood at the edge screaming, but no one turned, no one heard me. I woke up gasping, sweating, alone. The next day, I tried to pull myself together. I brushed my teeth, I even dressed, but I couldn't bring myself to leave the apartment. The world outside felt too loud, too sharp. The idea of facing people, even strangers, made my chest tighten. So I stayed inside. One day turned into two into four. Groceries sat untouched by the door. My laundry piled up. I let calls from work go unanswered. My leave hadn't officially started yet, but I wasn't ready to explain why I couldn't show up. What would I say? "Sorry, I'm grieving the version of my life that no longer exists." I watched old movies, but none of them held my attention. I flipped through baby books, but the joy I once felt was gone. The nursery, half-decorated, stared at me every time I passed it, a painful reminder of the future I was now facing. Alone. And for the first time, I asked myself a question I had been too ashamed to say out loud. What if I'm not enough for this child? The days blurred together. Sleep came in fragments. I ate just enough to keep the baby healthy. I canceled all appointments, ignored every call. My mother dropped by once, knocking gently, her voice full of concern. But I didn't open the door. I couldn't. I wasn't ready to face her eyes, the mixture of worry and pity I knew she'd try to hide. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror one night and didn't recognize the woman looking back. Pale, hollow, tired. My hands trembled as I tried to braid my hair, but I stopped halfway through and let it fall. "I'm okay," I whispered. I wasn't. I started writing letters to the baby, little notes in a notebook I kept by the couch. Some were sweet, others were raw, honest, full of fear. I told him how sorry I was, how much I wanted to be enough, how I didn't want him to grow up thinking he was unwanted, because he wasn't. Not for a second. It helped, in a strange way, like I was reaching out to a future version of myself, one who had made it through. But the darkest moment came 3 weeks later. I woke up from a nap on the couch, sweating, my stomach cramped sharply, and for one horrifying second, I thought something was wrong with the baby. I rushed to the bathroom, heart pounding. But it wasn't labor. It was a panic attack. I sat on the cold tile floor, clutching my chest, struggling to breathe. My vision blurred. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I don't remember how long I was there. But I remember the fear, not just for myself, but for the baby. What if something happened to me? What if he ended up in the hands of someone like Ethan? That thought snapped something inside me, not with anger, but with resolve. Because if I couldn't fight for myself, I had to fight for him. It started with a knock, a soft, hesitant knock on my apartment door one rainy afternoon. I wasn't expecting anyone. I had barely spoken to anyone in weeks, but something told me to answer this time. When I opened the door, I was stunned. It was Daniel, Ethan's former business partner. We hadn't spoken since the divorce. He was always polite, respectful, but distant. The kind of man who kept out of personal affairs. But now, here he was, hair damp from the rain, eyes heavy with something that felt like guilt. "I'm sorry to show up like this," he said quietly, "but I think you deserve to know what's really going on." I let him in, still trying to process what was happening. He sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped, as if rehearsing his next words. "Ethan didn't just leave you because of the baby," he began. "He left because he was in trouble. Financially, professionally, and he didn't want you to know." I blinked. "What kind of trouble?" He sighed. "Fraud, embezzlement, not huge amounts, but enough to draw attention. He started moving company money into private accounts. I found out and gave him a choice. Come clean or walk away." My stomach turned. "So he walked away," I whispered. Daniel nodded, and then walked into Savannah's arms, whose father, by the way, owns a private investment firm. Ethan's trying to leverage that connection to cover up his mess. The pieces fell into place like broken glass finally aligning. The sudden coldness, the desperate need for a new beginning. The gala, the donation, it wasn't just a love story. It was a distraction, a cover-up. "And the foundation?" I asked. "The Heart Foundation?" He hesitated. "Savannah's already trying to get a seat on the board. Ethan's pushing for it. Your name's being quietly erased from all old records. It's like you never existed." My chest ached, not just from the betrayal, but from the scope of it all. He wasn't just trying to erase me emotionally. He was erasing me legally, financially, publicly. But Daniel wasn't done. He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a flash drive. "This has everything," he said. "Bank transfers, fake invoices, email threads. He's covering it up well, but not well enough." I stared at the flash drive in my hand, my fingers trembling. "This could ruin him," I said quietly. Daniel nodded. "It could also protect you." "Why are you doing this?" I asked, searching his face. He didn't flinch, because I watched what he did to you, and because I didn't stop him when I should have. There was silence for a moment. Then he added, "Ethan thinks you're weak. He thinks you're so buried in grief that you'll never fight back." He didn't say it with pity. He said it like a challenge. Like he knew better. Like I should know better. And deep down, I did. That night, after Daniel left, I opened my laptop and plugged in the drive. My screen lit up with a string of folders, labeled by month, by vendor name, by transaction type. I clicked through them, heart pounding faster with every document I opened. wire transfers to shell companies, emails with fake names, false invoices tied to non-existent events. It was all there. I took notes, screenshots, organized everything in a separate folder. It felt like reclaiming control, piece by piece, and then I found it. A digital contract, one I had signed months before without reading the fine print. It had been part of a trust Ethan convinced me to set up when we got married. For tax reasons, he'd said at the time. I trusted him. But the document now stared back at me with one glaring clause. If Ava Mitchell Hart is proven mentally or emotionally unstable, all financial and custodial rights revert solely to Ethan Hart. I felt sick. He hadn't just walked out on me. He had been laying the foundation to destroy me long before he left. The panic attacks, the isolation, the carefully orchestrated public humiliation. It wasn't just cruelty, it was strategy. But now, I had proof, I had power, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't scared of him anymore. I didn't cry after reading the contract. I didn't scream, or throw things, or sink back into the dark place I just crawled out of. Instead, I stood up, walked to the bathroom, and looked in the mirror, not to cry, but to say goodbye. To the old version of myself, the woman who waited, who begged, who broke quietly in the corner of every room. She was gone. I tied my hair back, washed my face, and opened the window. For the first time in weeks, I let fresh air fill the apartment. It smelled like rain and hope. The next day, I called my mom. When she heard my voice, she cried. I was so scared, she said. I didn't know how to help you. You helped, I whispered. Just by waiting. She came over that afternoon with a bag of groceries and her old sewing kit. We're getting your strength back, Ava, she said, smiling through tears. One meal and one stitch at a time. And we did. I started eating again. Walking. Writing in my journal. I set up the nursery. Not for Ethan, not for appearances, but for my son. I picked out soft blankets and star-shaped lights. I painted the walls sage green. Every brush stroke felt like a declaration. I'm still here. Then came the makeover. Not because I needed to look better for anyone, but because I needed to see the woman I was becoming. I went to a local salon, the same one I used to pass on my way to work. The stylist trimmed my hair into a chic shoulder-length bob. Simple, elegant, powerful. I got a manicure, soft pink nails that made my hands feel steady again. I even bought a new dress, not a maternity one, but a tailored wrap dress in emerald green that hugged my figure and made my eyes look fierce. And I stood in front of the mirror, hands on my belly, and whispered, "We're not broken. We're becoming." That night, I emailed the files from Daniel's flash drive to my lawyer. All of it. Every transaction, every clause, every threat disguised as paperwork. And for the first time since Ethan left, I felt something I hadn't in months. Power. Things moved quickly after that. My lawyer, an old college friend named Rachel, responded within hours. Her voice was sharp, calm, and confident. Exactly what I needed. "This is more than enough," she said. "You're going to be okay, Ava. And so is your baby." We filed an emergency petition with the court the next day to freeze the trust, block any changes to custody, and initiate an investigation into Ethan's financial activities. It was the first legal document with my name on top. My name, not his. I didn't stop there. With Rachel's help, I reached out to a journalist, someone she knew at a local investigative outlet, the kind that didn't care about headlines but cared deeply about truth. I gave them everything, anonymously, at first. Within a week, whispers started. News about unexplained discrepancies in Hart and Lane's financial records began to circulate. A quiet audit was confirmed, and then a bombshell headline hit the internet. Exclusive, internal documents suggest Hart Foundation misused donor funds. Sources point to Ethan Hart. The photo beneath the headline? Ethan and Savannah at the gala, mid-toast, smiling like royalty. I didn't share the article. I didn't need to. It spread on its own, like fire in dry grass. But perhaps the most powerful moment came 3 days later, when I walked into my old workplace, the preschool, to visit. The kids ran up to me, arms wide. One little girl looked up at my belly and said, "Miss Ava, your baby's lucky." I blinked fast, swallowing the lump in my throat. I wasn't just becoming stronger. I was already someone worth admiring. And I realized then, the woman Ethan tried to erase didn't disappear. She evolved, and she was ready for whatever came next. The press conference wasn't my idea, it was Rachel's. "At some point," she said, "this story stops being just personal. it becomes a matter of justice. I was nervous. Exposing Ethan publicly wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my voice, making sure that what happened to me and to countless others didn't get swept under a rug of privilege. So we organized it carefully. No drama, no flashy headlines, just facts. It was held at a small legal center in downtown Seattle, a neutral venue. Cameras lined the back wall, reporters from local news outlets in the front. Rachel stood beside me as I adjusted the mic. I took a deep breath. "My name is Ava Mitchell," I began, "and for the past year I've remained silent while lies were told about me, in courtrooms, boardrooms, and black tie galas." The room fell quiet. I told my story. Not just the heartbreak, but the manipulation, the abuse of power, the attempt to declare me unstable just to strip me of rights to my child. And then Rachel took over, laying out the evidence. Page after page of financial fraud, misappropriation of charitable funds, emails proving intent to defraud donors and to silence me legally. A murmur spread through the crowd. Cameras clicked, voices whispered, and just when we thought it was over, one hand shot up. A reporter stood. "Miss Mitchell, do you believe Ethan Hart should go to jail for what he did?" I looked straight into the lens. "I believe people should face the consequences of their choices, and I believe children deserve to grow up knowing truth matters more than wealth." That line made the evening news. So did Rachel's final statement. As of today, Ava Mitchell has filed a civil suit against Ethan Hart and Savannah Lane for emotional damages, financial manipulation, and defamation of character, and is fully cooperating with the ongoing criminal investigation into Hart Foundation's misuse of donor funds. The clip went viral within 48 hours. And Ethan? He went silent. For the first time in his life, he had nothing to say. What followed was a chain reaction Ethan couldn't stop. First came the press frenzy. Every media outlet, from business magazines to morning talk shows, ran the story. The man once hailed as a young visionary was now facing allegations of fraud, manipulation, and abuse of trust. Then came the fallout. Donors pulled out of the Hart Foundation. Savannah's father publicly distanced his firm from Ethan. Their relationship, once paraded on social media, went radio silent. And finally, the investigation escalated. Ethan was subpoenaed. He denied everything at first, called it a smear campaign, claimed I was a bitter ex-wife, but the evidence spoke louder than his denial. The court date was set, and I was ready. The day of the hearing, I walked into the courthouse in a black tailored maternity dress, head held high. Cameras flashed, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't the woman from the baby store anymore. I wasn't the shattered wife hiding behind closed curtains. I was a mother, a fighter, and a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to protect. In court, Rachel delivered a brilliant case. The financial records, the signed contract, the media manipulation, the attempted character assassination, she laid it all bare. And Ethan? He sat at the defense table, pale, sweating, his lawyer whispering frantically in his ear. When Savannah took the stand, she broke within minutes. "I didn't know about the contract," she said. "He told me she was unstable. He said she was dangerous." "And did you believe him?" Rachel asked. Savannah hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I did." The courtroom was silent. I looked at her, not with anger, but with a kind of sad clarity she had been used to, just in a different way. The judge called for a short recess, and as I stood to leave the room, I passed by Ethan. He didn't look at me. He didn't have to, because in that moment he knew he had lost. Not just the case, but control, reputation, power. And me, the woman he thought he could break quietly. 3 months after the court hearing, I gave birth. It was a stormy Tuesday night, rain tapping against the hospital windows, thunder rumbling in the distance. But inside my room, everything was calm. He came into the world at 2:11 a.m., 7 pounds, 6 ounces, perfect. They placed him on my chest and I cried, not out of fear, not out of sadness, but from a deep, full joy I didn't think I'd ever feel again. I named him Noah James. Noah for the strength to survive the flood. James for my father, whom I barely remembered, but who my mother always said was kind. In those first few days, holding him felt like holding a second chance. Every sleepless night, every diaper change, every little sigh from his lips reminded me that healing didn't come in grand moments, it came in the quiet ones. Ethan never showed up. Not to the hospital, not to the follow-up custody meeting. His silence was the loudest gift he ever gave me. Meanwhile, the Heart Foundation collapsed under public scrutiny. Donations dried up, investigations continued, Savannah disappeared from public life. Rumor had it she moved to another city, changed her last name. And Ethan? He pled guilty to multiple counts of fraud. Part of his plea deal required him to relinquish all financial ties to the foundation and to dissolve the trust he created to manipulate my future. The judge granted me full custody of Noah, with Ethan stripped of all parental rights. It wasn't just a legal victory, it was freedom. One evening as I rocked Noah to sleep, I thought about how far I'd come. From standing alone in a baby store, humiliated, to standing tall in courtrooms, empowered. And I realized the woman I used to be? She didn't vanish. She evolved into someone even she didn't know she could become. 6 months later, I stood in front of a group of women at a local community center, the same one where I used to volunteer before my life fell apart. Except now, I wasn't just volunteering. I was leading a workshop. Rising Through the Wreckage, it was called. A support group for women navigating life after betrayal, abandonment, and emotional abuse. I looked around the circle, at the tired eyes, the hesitant smiles, the quiet strength in every posture, and I told them my story. Not with shame, but with pride. Because surviving isn't weakness, it's warriorship. I lost almost everything, I said, but I gained something better. A self I actually like, a life I'm proud of, and a son who will never grow up watching his mother shrink for anyone. They clapped, some cried. One woman hugged me afterward and said, "You made me believe I can start over." That night, I tucked Noah into bed, his tiny fingers wrapped around mine. The nursery was warm, filled with soft lullabies and glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. I sat beside his crib and whispered a promise I had made to myself months ago. I'll never let anyone dim your light. Or mine. Later, as I watched the rain through the window, I thought about Ethan. About how people like him don't break you all at once. They chip away at your confidence until you don't recognize your reflection. But now I saw myself clearly. Strong, steady, unapologetically whole. Because this story was never really about a man who betrayed a woman. It was about a woman who remembered her worth and built a world too powerful for any man to destroy again. And to every woman out there who feels invisible, discarded, or broken, you are not. You are rising. Even if it feels like crawling, keep going. Because one day you'll look back and realize the fire didn't consume you. It forged you.